Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, January 24th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris, continuing the position preview series and getting things going in the outfield, which typically takes us 3 full episodes to get through. So we have our episode today, we got one Thursday, and we've got one Friday as we try and close the book on hitters in anticipation of Pitcher Week, which is already coming up after the weekend.
75 capsules written. I feel good about my rankings to about 100, and we're going to publish 150. It's going to be nice. It's going to have some bells and whistles this year. I hope people enjoy.
Be excited about it. Theathletic.com/rates and barrels gets you a subscription if you don't have one already. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the like button. If you're not watching us on YouTube, come subscribe to the channel. Leave us a nice rating and review if you're enjoying us as a podcast. Let's get to it. We've got a lot of players in Tier 1 here. Again, this is all by ADP from the NFBC. If you're just joining us for the first time, we've got all the infield previews are done. You can go back in the feed and listen to those, but there is a ton of talent up top. Many of them are first rounders, and that includes the consensus number 1 overall pick, Ronald Acuña Jr. You got Julio Rodríguez, Corbin Carroll, Kyle Tucker. We talked about Mookie Betts on our second base episode. He is part of that cluster as well. And you've also got Fernando Tatis Jr., Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, and Yordan Alvarez. Judge and Alvarez most likely to kind of slide to the very early part of round 2 of this group, but really anything is possible with these 8 players. We don't have to spend a lot of time on Acuña because he just had an amazing season. 41 homers, 73 steals, a 337 average. All I can think is there's nowhere to go but down. Like, he could drop and still be the number 1 pick going into 2025 drafts as well. So I don't know how much time you spent looking for warts in Acuña's amazing season, but do you see any reason to believe that he shouldn't be the first overall pick in just about every draft?
No, I mean, the obvious thing is just like, where do the strikeouts go? I mean, that's, to me, is the obvious thing, because he used to strike out round league average a little bit more, and then last year he just cut it to 16%. And you can look at the chase rate, it improved. But it only improved by like a point or two. And, I've had a hitting director make the point to me that he isn't sure that people change their eye at the plate significantly over their careers. And he wasn't able to produce, a really great example. Now, Acuña seems to be one of those examples, or maybe just the first chase rates we got from him, the first, the first, outside of zone swing, we're not actually his true talent. Like, this is just his true talent. He's like a 26 to 27% chase rate guy. If you look at his zone swing, up a little bit, but that's not where it came from. So I looked at the heat maps, and he's spitting on slow stuff in the zone. He's spitting on it more. So on the outer half. So there's just like this very specific thing that he's doing, and he's focusing more on middle in and low. Those are his strengths. And I don't know what to do with that, because he has demonstrated like a 23% strikeout rate. So I kind of think I think that I actually side with the projections that he's going to strike out like 18, 19, 20% of the time next year and kind of regress, because I don't know. It seems like step 1 of a cat and mouse game. So he's like, okay, I'm going to, spit on slow stuff away. Then they're going to like throw him slow stuff in or something. I don't know. They're going to find some little way to attack him, because you got to find something. There's got to be some little thing. He's got a hole high and away. Maybe they'll start throwing him more hard high and away. But I don't think it's going to be major regression. He's just those plus speed, plus power, some of the best raw power in the game, good eye at the plate. I mean, he's everything. He's the whole package. There's no reason not to take him number 1. And for what it's worth, projections say he's number 1 by a long shot. Like, he's number 1 so much that if you could pay for the number 1 pick, you should.
I think the exercise, if you're not drafting first overall, is more or less, well, who do you think could be the player that does better than Acuña? If Acuña comes down a little and someone else takes a step forward, someone else could be the number 1 overall pick in drafts going into next season. Rodríguez, Carroll, even Tucker seems like he could be a candidate. It seems more like it'd be one of the younger guys, Bobby Witt Jr., who we talked about on our shortstop preview. He'd be in that conversation as well.
What is this conversation? Someone to take the step forward and maybe be number 1?
Well, you have to make a decision if you don't have that first pick, right? If you're sitting 2 through 5, 2 through 6, or even 7, you're looking at Julio Rodríguez versus Carroll versus Tucker versus Witt versus Betts. How do you decide between that group? Because they're all really good. I mean, Tucker is like the best floor guy. He's got the longest track record, mostly of that group, with the exception of Betts. And it helps all the categories. 13.6% K rate keeps that batting average really stable. So you could go kind of safe and do that. You could play the extra speed angle and go with Carroll. The only knock on Carroll I have is the shoulder. Just a long-term concern that the shoulder could keep coming back and being an issue. Lefties, 98 WRC plus in that split. So maybe compared to other elite players, there's like a slight weakness there. But
I've got a clear one for me.
We're picking nits. And Julio, to me, Julio has the loudest tools, like so that across the board. And that's what you need if you're going to get to the Acuña sort of level.
I think it's Julio. And he even has some of the similar flaws that Acuña demonstrated before he became the clear number 1 overall, in that he's a little aggressive and he strikes out a little bit much. I think Acuña, I think if there is another Acuña, it's Julio Rodríguez. One of the things I liked, I looked at his splits. He stole bases every month of the season. Last year, there was a little bit of a weird second half dip. He only stole 2 bases in 3 tries in September, probably. I think that he was actually slugging really well that month. So maybe he just wasn't staying on first base a lot. But he stole at least 2 bases in every month. He has extremely loud raw power, a 116.7 max EV last year. He turns them into barrels, 52% hard hit, just a few too many grounders, and just a few too many chases and strikeouts. But he's 23 years old, so there's a natural progression there where you'd expect the strikeout rate and the chase rate to improve. And you can always have one of those things where something clicks, like he spits on soft away or whatever, like he finds something that really clicks in his approach and takes it to another level. We already had a 30 season from him last year. I could see this guy doing a 340-40. Why not? It's he's got that kind of package. And so I'm definitely taking Julio Rodríguez second. Corbin Carroll is a guy but the shoulder does bother me a little bit. And he, in some ways, seems to be maxing out the quality of his balls in play. He did have a 113.8 max EV, but that's not in the Acuña Rodríguez territory. His barrel rate was okay, but not great. I'm not sure that we're going to see 30 homers from him. And I doubt we'll ever see 40 homers from him unless there's a lot of progression in how he hits the ball.
No, I see some similarities to the power profile for Carroll, at least in present time, to like Jose Ramirez, but you're getting a lot more speed, right? You're getting a shot at 50 plus bags. And I think if the power dips a little bit for Corbin Carroll, maybe it's singles and doubles instead. And that's even more steals. So I think that's part of the package too. It also depends on what you want to do with your next couple of picks. So if, for example, you wanted to be pretty aggressive with early pitching and you start with Carroll, you're not necessarily going to have to rely as much on some of the fringe averagey like speed sources throughout the middle rounds, where you're not going to be chasing with Andres Jimenez and some of those players we talked about, because you got those
the guys that end up on my draft and hold and are ending up on them again, because I started the second draft and hold with Yordan Alvarez and Bryce Harper. So, I felt like I needed steals the whole way through. I think this is a great one to pair with Corbin Burns or who's the other sort of top 5-ish guy.
Zach Wheeler would be in that range for you coming back. Usually maybe Gossman, if you like Gossman. I decided to do 2 pitchers. So when I was choosing between Tucker and Carroll, I went Carroll because I wanted those extra bags and I wanted to avoid the speedy players I don't like, because I want more power from those next few hitters I'm eventually going to get. So yeah, it was a trio at the top of Carroll with Burns and Tyler Glass now. And now I get to kind of see what falls back to me. We'll see if it works. It could be a complete disaster. It's the lowest barrel rate for Corbin Carroll, 7.6%. Lowest barrel rate of anybody you're going to find near the first round, with the exception of Jose Ramirez. And even within the second round, too. All the second round hitters are going to get you a better barrel rate, most likely as well. But speed off the charts. We've seen it on display now for a couple of seasons. Moving to the
Tucker
other. Oh, yeah.
Tucker is just like super, super safe.
Really
like
safe.
I could see him being in the conversation with Corbin Carroll and Mookie Betts. But there is another guy in the outfield now that I think has the potential to leapfrog and has the tools of a Julio Rodríguez. That goes a little bit later.
Yeah. Who's that?
Fernando Tatis Jr.
Mm.
And we've got up on YouTube a leaderboard that I put together that was the month-by-month progression for Fernando Tatis Jr. last year in barrel rate and max EV. It's not like a linear thing where he starts out bad and he ends up good. September was his second worst month. But what you do see is in July and August, he had a 14.5% barrel rate and a 15% barrel rate. He hit the ball 113 in July. I see this as someone who's sort of revving up the car engine, after the car has been sitting for a while. And it takes a little while, but once he got going, it actually looked like the Tatis of old. So when I look at, the reduced barrel rate, he went from, godly barrel rates in 2021 and 2022 of 20% basically. And you look at this 11% barrel rate and you say, this is what happens when you ride a motorbike when you shouldn't. And I think he'll have like a 15% barrel rate next year. I'm not sure if he'll get back to the 20s, but a 15% barrel rate is going to be near the league leaders instead of being the league leader. And so I think that some of these power projections might be a little bit low. I could see him really getting to 40 homers again next year. And he kept stealing bases through all this. So I would see the batting average going up and the power going up. And if you want somebody with more ceiling, if you want somebody that could join the top three next year, Tatis is my guy.
Yeah, he's flashed it before, and it was a career best strikeout rate, 22.2%. You think about that in the context of the rust. Okay, still some skills growth, even with that power loss. And I think seeing the power coming back in the second half is a really encouraging sign for him. You see Soto in this exact same range, played every game last year, set a new career high in homers, racked up another boatload of runs and RBIs. I think he matched his career high for steals, got like a dozen bags as well. And he did it playing half of his games at a place that's pretty tough on left-handed power. Now he's a Yankee for his walk year. And I think the question everybody's wondering about is, will he take full advantage of the park given his approach?
I don't know. He's pretty ensconced in his approach. He's never had a pull rate above 40%. And he hits the ball on the ground. He is not one of these pull fly ball guys. And there's a corner of the internet that's yelling that Soto could be better. I'm not going to tell him what to do. He's one of the best hitters of our time, and his approach allows him to see the ball really well and put up OBPs. He's never had an OBP lower than 400, and he's a 421 for his career. So I think this approach really works for him. Maybe late in his career, as the power wanes a little bit, he'll have a kind of pulled fly ball, portion of his career. But for now, the oppo power is enough to get it out. I think he'll just gain a homer or two or three on the ones he does pull, because he does it sometimes, but I don't think that we're saying, he's going to add a bunch. There was a conversation in my mailbag last week about park factors in New York. And one of the things that's interesting is that it suppresses hits while it, increases homers. New York does. And in some parks, that's a natural relationship between where the wall is, and, if the wall is closer, it's going to give you homers, but make the outfield smaller for the outfielder to patrol. So there are some parks where that's totally the case. With Soto, I still think that, there's atmospheric concerns and then there's wall concerns. And San Diego, I don't know if people realize this, but it's one of the coldest 3 parks in the league. And New York in July and August is hot. It's hot. So, it may have a different shape. Maybe he'll start cold again, or maybe, he'll have some homers early and some hits late. But I would expect a little bit of a boost in homers and in average, due to the weather effects, and a big boost in runs and RBI due to the lineup effects. I don't think I quibble much with Steamer. 284, 39 homers, 117 runs, and 104 RBI. That is a big projection. You won't see much like that around the big leagues. And I believe in the high plate appearance totals, because last year he said, I'm going to play 162. And guess what he did? And in his walk year, I think he's probably going to say, I'm going to play 162. And I'm guessing he will.
Yeah, shooting for a $400 million payday, perhaps, this offseason. So a lot of reasons for him to kind of go all in and do all the things he can do. Maybe we'll see a new career high in steals. Might be like 15 instead of 12, but he's on base all the time. We see guys do this.
No one needs to do that study, dude. Like, I swear to God, I've seen the study that says that you plate appearances and innings pitched go up in walk years. So that's actually a study that's been done. But stolen bases in walk years, I swear to God, I think they do it. I know I'm kind of like looking at Judge and some other people, and it's anecdotal right now, but I swear it's a thing.
Yeah, we'll have to look more closely at that 37th percentile sprint speed, though, for Juan. So that's why I'm saying 15 bags instead of like 20 or 25. It's just continuing to do what he's doing with a slight nudge upwards. That'd be the most I'd expect. Aaron Judge right here in this late round one range as well. It was a toe injury last year that was caused by what I would describe as an unusual bullpen curb at the outfield wall in Dodger Stadium. I would chalk this one up as this is an accident-prone sort of injury, if you want to kind of put it on one folder or the other. Some of the stuff that happened to Judge earlier in his career was a little more of the soft tissue variety. You kind of just worried, like, oh, is he one of these big guys that's just going to deal with stuff all the time?
This year was like you heard, like, the wall, like, they've changed the wall since it happened.
They lowered it, like they got rid of the concrete slab.
Yeah. They put like some more padding out there and stuff. Like,
it's a good idea.
The Yankees were a little bit mad about it, and
I mean, there's no reason I understand that some of the older ballparks have certain design things that make them what they are, but you should be able to make them safe. I mean, look, is the wall at Wrigley Field a good idea? Yeah, you cover some bricks with ivy. It doesn't make it any softer.
Yeah, the Giants. I mean, I have an ear for people who say that, like, baseball is unique in that every park is different, and I like that, and I do like that as a fan. But I think that there are ways that you can design parks to look different, and use architecture to make them look different, and also keep the players safe. Like, I still think that San Francisco's park looks unique and beautiful and is great, and they don't have the bullpens on the mound anymore, on the field anymore, and they lost a little bit of Triples Alley. It's like, as a fan, I don't go, oh God, this place sucks now. They used to have mounds on the field and a big Triples Alley. It's like, no, I still love the park. And now, I forget the player's name. He was like a fourth outfielder for the Giants. He like tripped on the mound and face planted into the brick wall there. That's where the foul line is, and had a concussion. Mac Williamson.
Oh yeah.
And I think I don't think he played after that.
Yeah.
So, they had a reason to change it. Anyway,
as for Judge,
I do worry about Aaron Judge's plate appearance projections, because if you look at Steamer, it says he should be the second best outfielder in baseball, and which makes him like a top 4 pick in baseball. Mm-hmm. And that's tied to a 669 nice plate appearance projection. I don't know, man. I don't know if I can give him that.
Yeah, ATC has him at 623, and he still is projected for 45 homers, 7 steals, a 277, 396, 584.
Well, look what he did in small time last year.
Yeah, over 100 runs, over 100 RBIs. I love Judge of this group. I think the durability concerns are slightly overblown. Like I said, earlier in his career did have some stuff, but the last 3 seasons, other than the toe, he's been pretty healthy. And I think that bodes really well for his chances of getting up over 600 pretty easily again this year. So he's someone you feel really good about if you end up with one of those late first round positions, because you're getting someone that could finish top 5 very easily. Many of these players can. We still see it in a per game production level from Judge in 2023. And then there's Yordan Alvarez, who's kind of like a hybrid. If you said, take the best qualities from each Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and mush them into one player, I would say Yordan Alvarez is the closest thing to that, where you've got this average that projects to be really good, power that could still probably get into the mid to high 40s range in terms of homers, maybe even 50 is a possibility. I wouldn't write that off. And like Judge, I think some of the durability concerns we had a few years ago have come down a little bit, even though they haven't gone away completely.
Yeah, I mean, only 496 plate appearances for him last year for Yordan Alvarez. But what I do like is a ground ball fly ball mix that's a little bit more weighted towards fly balls than Juan Soto. Otherwise, a similar approach to Juan Soto, but more raw power. And so it's an all fields approach that keeps his K rate down. I mean, honestly, if we had like a best hitter draft and it was just hitting, like, I think he might be the best pure hitter in baseball. I mean,
WRC plus draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think he can reach every part of the zone. He does different things with different balls in different parts of the zone, but he can lift it. He can make contact. He's great eye. And just, I also get that Bonzian sort of feeling when he comes to the plate where, oh boy, like, do you remember like in the playoffs, like people trying to pitch to him where just like, and what are you going to do now?
Yeah. He's, to me, he might be the guy that in the entire league, you'd say he's probably the hardest guy to pitch to.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to get more perspective on that at some point in the not so distant future. But
well, Alvarez, it was my consolation prize. So I'm in a second draft and hold. And I got my worst. So KDS is where you pick, what pick you want. Which you can do in NFC. And I put 14th last because I thought, well, 15th, at least I get to pick twice in a row. And I got 14th. So I got exactly what I didn't want. And I was hoping for Judge, and Judge went 13. So I started with Yordan Alvarez and Bryce Harper, and I hate that position because I think it's a little early to take Gossman, Wheeler, and Burns as the second pick. And yet you don't necessarily end up a lot of steals unless you push Trey Turner over Yordan Alvarez, which the projections, say you shouldn't. Another option there is Ohtani, which I think you took 14.
I tried Ohtani at 14. Yep.
And then what'd you take coming back?
Yordan.
Yeah. So I went Yordan Alvarez, Bryce Harper, which is actually a similar situation where you're hoping to get a few steals, keep the batting average real high. It's okay, but I don't like my first pitchers in that league are Grayson Rodriguez and Yuri Perez, which I took in the 5th and 6th. I went Hader, Rodriguez, Perez, which is just against every bone in my body. Like, I don't want to do any of that. Like, those are unproven guys, and I'm not sure of the innings. And I took a reliever as my first pitcher. Like, I hate it. But that's just something to think about when you start with Yordan Alvarez. You're not starting with stolen bases, but you're keeping the batting average and the power high. And then you have to think about what your second pick is going to be.
It's the cost of hanging out with me, because that's something I would do, is have to build one that way. And I'd make myself feel good about it, because I'm that kind of narcissist when it comes to building rosters.
I'm seeing some different players later on. I don't hate it as much now down the road, but I still hate it. I want to draft at the top of the league.
Let's move on to tier 2 in the outfield. These are players that are not inside the top 30 overall in ADP, but a few of them are very, very close, often going at that 2-3 turn of a 15-team league. That includes Luis Robert, Michael Harris, Adolis Garcia, Randy Arozarena, Nolan Jones, and Cody Bellinger. There are a ton of potential wrinkles in this group that could give you some pause at the price. We'll start with Robert. He's a star on a rebuilding team. The thing that was weird about last season, he narrowly missed going 40-20. is that his strikeout rate jumped from 19.2% to 28.9%. He doesn't walk a lot, so the OBP lags. And I wonder, because the supporting cast is so bad, if this is one of those like small traps you could fall into where, yeah, the power and speed's great, but the runs and RBIs are surprisingly light, and there's actually some batting average risk if the K rate stays high. I don't know. I like the player. I think he's fun. He's one of the few reasons to watch the White Sox in 2024. But there are some ways this could go kind of sideways for somebody you're thinking about in the first 3 rounds of your draft.
Yeah, I also wonder a little bit about psychology. I know, this is where you expect me to talk about his poor chase rate and, that strikeout rate pop. And I don't normally talk about psychology, but what's the psychology of a, oft injured guy on a poor team, on a bad team?
Right. Why push yourself back into the lineup if your team's horrible?
The only other thing I can come up with is, would you try to play your way out of Chicago? Would you just try to have a career year? But if you have a career year, you're not sure how that goes either, because maybe Chicago says, well, we still have you till 27. Like, we're not trading you.
They're going to be putrid. So if he continues to play at a really high level, teams are going to look at that contract and come calling and say, hey, we want 3 years of way underpriced Luis Robert. So I think he can kind of help himself.
That would be like the franchise rejuvenation trade, right? That would be like, give us your best prospects and a young major leaguer.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, man, he's a strange player. I think you prefer the version that gets you almost 40 homers with the increased strikeout rate. It just changes where the floor is a little bit for him in that other category. He's really efficient as a base stealer, 20 for 24. So you're not really worried about stolen bases going away. I think it's almost there's like health concerns. Like, you look back at what he's done, 68 games in 2021, 98 games in 2022. So I think there's extreme health risk. And aside from just the White Sox factor, like, I don't know. Like, there are times where it seems like he's at odds with his manager and he ends up on the bench. Like, and there's just some stuff in that. I don't want that to be a thing, but all of it just gives me a lot of questions for a player that goes this early, even though he could blow past it. He could be someone that goes even earlier next year. He has the
tools. Like, we were talking about the tools that Tatis has to join. Like, he does have the tools to join an Acuña at the very top of a draft. I'm a little bit skeptical he's going to get there. And this is where I do talk about the chase rate. Like, the chase rate for him is like almost 20 points higher than it is for Acuña. So if you're asking for an improvement there, which he actually, had one of his better chase rates last year, it's still going to be bad. And you look at the walk rates for Tatis and Acuña, and walk rates aren't something that normally, unless you're in a points league, they aren't something that normally port over to fantasy value in a very obvious way. They do add to runs. But I think it does speak to the fact that he's got a flawed approach. It's kind of a grip it and rip it approach. It's not one that I want to have near the end of his career. In the middle of his career, if he was healthy and he was athletic and, he was playing 600, 700 plate appearances, I would say, I'm going to eat all of this I can get in the meantime and worry about, it going stale later. But, when you wrap it all up with the injuries and the poor approach, I don't know. I haven't targeted him. This seems like a really poor time to trade for him in a dynasty league, because the price has got to be sky high. Mm-hmm. And in redraft leagues, it just seems like this is a pretty high price for somebody that the floor could totally fall out from.
I just think the extra tricky part is the K rate could come down and we could look so dumb for not wanting to take him.
Yeah. What if he pairs the 20% strikeout rate with the 15% barrel rate? Like, he'll have an amazing season.
Goes partway back in between. If he goes down to 24% and walks a little bit more, like that happens. We've seen players older than Luis Robert make some adjustments as hitters, and the payoff ends up being huge. The other guys in this group, Harris, I thought was unlucky on balls in play once he came off the injury last year, and really showed us a lot. I mean, it's a 10% barrel rate now for his young career. He cut the ground balls last year too, which I think was really encouraging.
Huge.
And he struck out less. So there's a chance that as that OBP sits at least in the 330 range and maybe inches up a little bit, that he could move up in the batting order in Atlanta as well.
Yeah, and for him, what I was saying about like poor approach and young and that the poor approach leads to more strikeouts and a big strikeout rate increase in your early 30s if you're still chasing a lot. Just look at sort of Javier Baez or Josh Hamilton as an example, but it's been something that's been studied. Harris is more along the lines of, I don't care about that right now. He's 22. Same time, I had a graph that I thought we should look at, which is up on YouTube, which shows his chase rate over time. And he got more and more aggressive as the season went on. And he had a rolling chase rate of 50% by the end of the season. And I think this is something that he should focus on a little bit, because if you're swinging at 50% of the balls you see, it's not good. Like, the slugging percentage on balls inside the zone is like 200 points higher than balls outside the zone. So it's like there are guys like Jose Altuve will take a homer from his, he'll hit a homer on a ball at his nose and a ball at his knees, but that is the exception, not the rule. And though I think that Harris has a pretty good hit tool, I think his power numbers would benefit. He has a good max EV. How does he get his barrel rate up? Focus on pitches in the strike zone. So, I think that, we could see power growth if he kind of reverses that trend.
Do you like him the most of this bunch, even though,
yes,
Robert goes a little earlier, and then you've got some older guys with Garcia and Arozarena going behind him before you get to Jones and Bellinger, who present a few different questions for us. But with Garcia, Adolis Garcia did something I didn't think a player could do in their 30s. He made a big adjustment and chased a lot less. And the barrel rate went up even higher, 16%. Still picked his spots as a base stealer. He was 9 for 10, ran more in the past. And we talked about this with Marcus Semien. I think he could run more. I don't know if the Rangers want him to. It seems like their whole thing is our lineup's good. We'll run a little bit, but we're not going to run as much as everybody else. Maybe that changes in year 2 with the new rules, but I don't want to expect it, even though he has the skills to do it.
I'm going to expect some regression in that chase rate. I just think statistically it's the sound way to go. After 2 years of a 40% chase rate to go down to 33%, I think you have to at least find a middle ground. So I think that, especially you look at his age, people may not realize he's 30 years old. By definition, he should be post-peak. And so aging curves, as you see in the projections, say power decrease, strikeout rate increase. And yet still a pretty good season, 241 projection with 31 homers, 13 steals. I really like that. I just think that Harris is the one that has the best growth potential. And yet we were talking about his flaw there. It's kind of like a one flaw situation, whereas like Robert has 2 flaws. Arozarena is older and has some flaws of his own. Garcia has flaws of his own. And then Jones has a 30+% strikeout rate. So I still like Harris the best. And I guess I would say Arozarena second. Garcia, I would say, like, if he fell to me exactly where the projection said he should go, then, I'll take him. But I don't know. If he was still stealing bases, it would be a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think for now, needs to fall just a little bit for me to be excited. I'll go another direction with these mid.
He's going to have the fewest stolen bases of this tier, right?
Probably. Nolan Jones' speed looks legit. And I think the thing about Nolan Jones, I would worry more about his strikeout rate and how it's going to impact his batting average if he didn't play for the Rockies.
Right.
We talked about him as a surprising early rounder, and the thing that I hope they do is continue to play him against lefties. There's no indication that they'll back off him in that spot, and based on that small sample, they should keep doing that anyway. Even if that sample was bad, they should be playing him against lefties anyway, because he's good. I don't know how they needed 39 games of him at AAA before they could play him in the big leagues. I think he might have been up and down once. So, like, what the heck were they thinking at the beginning of last season? And what were the Guardians thinking?
They thought they were going to win.
But by not playing Nolan Jones.
yes.
Well, you want to know how bass-ackwards things are in Colorado.
I think he's played his way out of that discussion now, and he's an everyday player. But
yeah. Nolan Jones versus Robert is actually kind of interesting to me as a possible toss-up. Jones to me is a reason why I wouldn't take Robert. I'd wait a little bit and see if Jones fell, and then Cody Bellinger is just. You could keep looking at this season as long as you want, and I don't think you're going to come away with an answer that makes you feel good, because the StatCast numbers, they don't show you what you want to see behind the power rebound that he delivered. He still swings a decent amount of pitches outside the zone, but a 15% K rate gives him a chance to age a lot better. It's almost like he's Kyle Tucker, but he doesn't hit the ball as hard as often as
actually
Kyle Tucker does.
It's a funny comp because they look similar.
Yeah.
This is, so the one thing that I've seen said about Cody Bellinger is he still hits his fly balls hard, and fly ball exit velocity is sticky year to year. But I wanted to point out that although 91 is a decent number for average fly ball exit velocity, it is the worst of Cody Bellinger's career. So it is funny when you like look at things relative to the league and be like, okay, this is actually pretty decent compared to the league. And then you look at it compared to the player and you say, oh, this is the worst fly ball exit. That's what's up on the screen for YouTube users. So I think he's a trap. And I think that when you look at the free agents that are still out there and you wonder why they're still out there, I think that they're still out there because they have massive flaws that make teams scream no. And I think, was it you or was it, I think it was my buddy Matt Denowitz we were talking about this, and he said, it reminds me of when Prince Fielder was a free agent and all of the sort of numbers, the underlying numbers, the, proto StatCast, whatever it was we were looking at the time, said, don't do this. And it went on and he signed in like March or something, because the Tigers finally blinked and it ended up being as bad as an idea as people thought. I think that's what's going on. So if you think about Cody Bellinger, what is the flaw? He doesn't hit the ball hard anymore. And he hasn't hit the ball hard since he hurt his shoulder. So, yes, that's nice. The strikeout rate's better, but how much are going to pay for a guy who might move off of center field in the next 2 years to hit the ball kind of softly, get on base? Like, what happens if it's more 18 homers? What kind of a profile is that for my first baseman? I don't know if this is working for me. So that's the flaw there. Blake Snell, I think the obvious flaw is like, how many innings am I going to project for you? And you want, $200 million, like $200 million for how many innings, as much as I think Blake Snell is the best free agent left on the market. And then Jordan Montgomery actually strikes out fewer people than average. So, and this is a league where everyone's looking for strikeouts. So it's like, yeah, you've had a really good run, but am I going to overpay for something that's not actually there? So that's why I think these guys have hung around. And I think I don't want to say like a full avoid on Bellinger, because maybe you're in a league full of people who love StatCast and, have their own projections and have, Cody Bellinger hitting 18 homers next year and aren't into it. Maybe he's just good enough to hit 22, 23. Maybe, maybe he's still going to be a 2020 guy next year. Maybe with the reduced strikeout rate, he can be, 280, 290, 300 hitter, in which case, he's fine where he goes. So in certain leagues, maybe people are being too smart and he drops too far. I would consider, so Bellinger's ADP is what, 61?
Yeah, we're on there.
What's the would you rather's at 61? I definitely would take him over some of the next outfielders. Like, I'm not taking, and by my ADP list, I'm not taking Mike Trout over Cody Bellinger. I don't think I'm taking Jazz Chisholm, but that's close. Are you taking Christian Yelich? Actually, Christian Yelich over Cody Bellinger is really interesting.
No,
Projections say you should do that.
It's another pair of players who can't get away from each other. There's a handful of guys that are just forever linked together. Yelich and Bellinger are among them. I have Bellinger ahead of Trout and ahead of Chisholm for now, and I keep looking at both of those two guys and thinking, are we too low on them because of injuries? And in the case of Mike Trout, he's still very good at barreling the ball. I had to refresh the page a few times to make sure it wasn't a glitch. He still has 96 percentile sprint speed. Is that true? Can you check yours? Can you make sure that I'm not getting an old cached version of his page? Because I saw that. I was like, wow, he still runs really, really well.
It's amazing.
Even though he doesn't steal bases, it wasn't.
He's a friggin' linebacker is what he is.
And last year, it wasn't his back. It wasn't the back injury that we've been worried about for a long time. It wasn't the pesky calf stuff that's bothered him. It was a hamate injury. And we talk about it all the time. Once it's removed, the hamate's not a problem anymore. So it doesn't mean the back risk and the calf risk and their stuff has gone away completely. But all the time he missed last year was due to something new and somewhat random. So I actually think Mike Trout is a good target in this range right now. I want to have some Mike Trout this year.
Look at the projection with a 544 plate appearance projection from ATC, which I buy. Steamer has 658 right now. I don't know about that. I mean, even if he returns to health, he hasn't hit 658 since 2016. I think that's a little aggressive. But 544 seems doable. He did 499 in 2022. 544 for Mike Trout gives you 32 homers, 90 runs, 80 RBI, and a 260, 270 average. I mean, that or 260 2020. Still probably the 260 2020. No?
Maybe it depends on if you need speed or not. But if you have enough speed already, I just think Trout is so good.
Also, the 260 average for Trout seems low. Career 301. The worst he's ever hit is 280 before last year. I think it's more like 280, 35, 90 or something.
He's got a hard hit rate over 50% 4 years running. His barrel rate's been over 15% 6 consecutive seasons.
Yeah.
I'll take the over on the batting average, considering how well he runs. BABIP's going to be a little higher for a player that hits as many fly balls as he does. Hits the ball over the park, right? I don't think Mike Trout's morphed into some sort of extreme pull guy. He pulls it a healthy amount, but not
he's not
absurd.
Like a 48 or something.
Right. He's not all the way up in Kyle Schwarber territory, who's I think he pulls the ball more than anybody we're going to talk about today, because he pulls the ball more than pretty much everybody anyway. So I'm fine with Trout where he goes. I think you just want to make sure you've got your speed somewhere else, or that you've got a couple players in the next few rounds that you really believe in to come through for the bags that Trout is very unlikely to offer you at this stage of his career. With Jazz, he had turf toe last year, required surgery, ran a lot, even though he played through that injury. So I think the steals are really safe. Power looks good to the point. You could say Jazz probably has 30-30 skills, but he's got a career 31% strikeout rate against lefties. It's a 61 WRC plus. He's had a few chances now to sort of figure it out. So I just wonder if that's always going to be something he's missing and something that kind of drags down his contribution in batting average.
Oh, Fangraph says Peyton Burdick as a righty center fielder, sitting right there with a 79 WRC plus projection. Even if you only played him against lefties, your expected number would be somewhere around a 90 WRC plus. So maybe that's better than Chisholm.
I don't know. I think it comes down to what's your alternative. They're so cheap. It's not like they've got some overpriced veteran that mashes lefties that they can put out there that is good.
You could move Bryan De La Cruz to center and run out De La Cruz, Sanchez, and Avisel Garcia is still there.
I don't know. De La Cruz looks so bad defensively when I watch them. I don't know if he actually grades out poorly, but it's like comedy when I watch that guy play defense for some reason. I have no idea why.
I think that's also why he got traded. I mean, it looks like, kind of center fieldy offense. And I think the Astros were like, it's not center fieldy defense.
Right. And I think that's the key with Jazz. He looked really good in center field, played it well in his first season.
Just play the defense against lefties. Maybe he dropped in the order a little bit.
Hit him in the bottom third of the order against lefties. but don't take the playing time away. And it's still possible he could get better against them. It's not like he's had 8 seasons in the big leagues worth of plate appearances. Plus, he's missed time in those seasons. So I'd give it one more go. I just think it's something that even if he's getting that playing time, he might not be turning that into a lot of production. That could be something that drags him down or holds him back in that average category.
Yeah, I think he would. I mean, he seems like a guy that might be nice to pair with some of those low stolen base options in the first couple of rounds. Although I would have to say that if you pair Jazz Chisholm with Yordan Alvarez, you are walking a thin line. No,
a little bit. You got a little bit of injury risk.
Yeah.
Christian Yelich also in this cluster. I think he's been kind of sneaky bad against lefties last 3 seasons. A 233, 312, 341 line. There's your. How does Christian Yelich lose some playing time? Well, he's got a bulky back that bothers him from time to time.
Oh, and that's a great time to rest the back is when the lefty's in the lineup.
Right. So I think you might see him leak a little bit of playing time just because of those numbers being in sort of a 3-year decline and because they've got a lot of young outfielders. They've got depth that they can lean on to give him some rest, which probably makes him more effective overall if they're shooting for 140 games instead of 162.
Yeah, I wonder if there's an alternate universe where Christian Yelich has a 38% career fly ball rate and has hit 400 homers by now.
I think if he could, he would.
He did it once.
Doesn't mean he's bad that he can't, but man, this is just the new version of Yelich. He was 28 for 31 as a base stealer. He's been a sharp base runner his entire career, both like fast, but also a good decision maker. So he's still got that. Do you still trust that holds for another year at age 32?
I think so. And, he gives me the biggest case of like, why do this when you can do this other thing later? We need to have a noise drop for that or some sort of.
Yeah, we're going to make something
acronym for that, the reasonably best price alternatives. There's got to be something in there.
We're going to make WAIT the acronym.
WAIT?
Yeah, we'll figure out how to fit it later. I don't want to do that now.
Oh, like wait, as in why not wait? Yeah.
Yes, right.
And Christian Yelich versus Cody Bellinger. Like I actually, projections say it's Christian Yelich, although it does give him Steamer gives him 690 plate appearances right now. That's pretty amazing, 690. But they say that basically they're the same guy. Like 260, 2020, and 20 points of ADP separate them.
Yeah, that's an easy one for me. Yelich is at least a reason not to draft Bellinger. Someone else could swoop in and get Yelich, but Bellinger's going too early, period.
I think there's also in Bryan Reynolds oops, I decided to wait on Cody Bellinger for Christian Yelich, and then the guy right ahead of me took Christian Yelich. I don't think that the stolen bases poured over exactly right, but it's another 260 sort of 25-10 in this case. So it won't solve all your stolen base needs, but in terms of like, hey, I need like a $15 to $16 outfielder. And I think I can wait another round and get it. I think, having Reynolds and Yelich there together, is a possibility for, covering your butt if you miss there.
Yeah, Reynolds is just a little underrated. It chipped in the freebie steals last year. He was 12 for 13 on the base pass. He had 7 the year before, so that kind of makes sense just in terms of how much he scaled up. I think he can hold on to most of those gains. K rate came down a little bit from the previous year. I trust his power more than Yelich's, even if Yelich offers you more in that speed category.
He puts the ball in the air, so yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a good player that doesn't really get appreciated. And the other thing that's nice about Reynolds this year, the Pirates should be better, right? You have a full season of O'Neal Cruz back. Henry Davis gives him another credible hitter near the middle of the lineup. So those two guys should help Reynolds a little bit as far as padding the runs and RBIs. And I like that he's actually
could have another level.
You really like Sawinski. He comes up all the time.
Yeah. We'll talk about him more later.
He's a couple episodes away.
Yeah. No, I think you could just wait a few rounds and just take Sawinski.
Just draft him 5 times.
Could I have 5 Sawinskis on this team? I have 0 shares of I have one share in a dynasty league.
I think if you actually asked your commissioner of your league, can I have Jack Sawinski just 5 times for my 5 outfield spots? They'd be like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let us know how that works out for you.
What ADP you're going to cost me? Yeah,
Reynolds underdrafted for sure. Probably like the best value of this entire group. Makes sense given that he's going the latest. The 2 guys that go between Yelich and Reynolds, Josh Lowe and Kyle Schwarber, very different. Josh Lowe, nobody among outfielders in the top 100 pulled the ball less than Josh Lowe did. Kyle Schwarber, nobody in this group pulled the ball more than Schwarber did. With Lowe, it was the lowest strikeout rate since rookie ball, but right in line with the numbers he was posting really throughout his time in the Rays system. So I think that's just a good overall snapshot of his skills. Like we've seen it time and time again, and now we're starting to see it against top-level pitching. My question for you with Josh Lowe is, he did start to see a few starts against lefties from about mid-August till the end of the season. So maybe 6 to 8 starts. Didn't really get starts against them prior to that. And when you look at his numbers, the per game production was excellent because he was in a great platoon spot all season. Is that kind of as good as it can get, though, for Josh Lowe? Because I feel like he has to come down even on the split numbers. Like the production was amazing against righties for him.
Yeah, I just think at some point you may have a play every day guy. And that's what you're betting on, because by projections, this is a poor choice. He's a $10 guy surrounded by $15 to $20 guys because they give him 500 plate appearances because he's going to get platooned. But I see a guy who is nearly league average against same-sided guys. And if you take how excellent he has been against righties, and even if you shave some off of that to find his true talent, regress him, then you have an expected platoon level, it should be above 100. You know what I'm saying? Like if you are a true talent 125 guy against right-handers as a lefty, then your expected platoon rate should have you above league average against lefties. And when I look at the way this team is constructed, it is getting crowded in some places. I think that Brandon Lau's platoon problems are louder and worse and more established. I think that they may need 2 guys for shortstop to paper that one over. And they're doing stuff at third and at first and at DH in terms of platoons. So I think there may need to be just put him out there guy. And if it is Josh Lowe, he's the kind of guy that has the ability to push past this tier. I mean, the improved strikeout rate didn't hold all year, but at 25 to 26%, it's not going to kill his batting average completely. I know he didn't pull the ball a ton, but he pulled it a little bit more than the year before. And in the minors, he pulled it even more. So what I see is someone who could take the next step forward and pull the ball a little bit more and take a jump in power, because a 113 max EV is good raw power. 11% barrel rate is good. And both of those numbers suggest more than 20 home runs. So the projections could be wrong on like a number of fronts in terms of like he could play every day and get to 650. They have to do that with at least a couple spots on this roster. And if he gets to 650, he's going to get to 26, 27 homers. And he has not shot at 30-30. Maybe not with the best batting average, but I don't think one that'll hurt you. The average batting average in a 15-team league is around 257. Is actually like 255. And he's projected for 258. So I know this is one of those rare times when the projections say don't do it. That I say, I don't know if you're right. I think maybe I take a shot here.
Projections are a liar sometimes.
Yeah, they're not always right. I try to hew too close to them because they remind me, to be reasonable and to be reasoned. But in this case, like especially in this little mini tier here, like he's younger than everybody. Bryan Reynolds is not going to get better. Christian Yelich is not going to get better. Mike Trout's not going to get better. These guys aren't getting better around him. Even the guys going right behind him, Lane Thomas, Nick Castellanos, those guys aren't getting better. The only guy in this tier that could get better, other than Jazz, which I think he would be getting better by just having a healthy year, is Josh Lowe.
Could you look at Lowe as someone, if you miss out on Nolan Jones, so you like Nolan Jones, someone else likes Nolan Jones too, I need a player that can do similar things.
Yeah.
Doesn't get the benefit of Coors, doesn't barrel the ball as much, also doesn't strike out as much, but has that power speed combo that can kind of make up ground and maybe carries a little less batting average downside. But again, I think the park really helps Nolan Jones not have that really bad categorical problem in his skill set.
Kyle Schwarber, I think you have to have had a plus batting average all the way along. And it's one of those things that projections don't actually capture, Like you're like, oh, look, Kyle Schwarber is an $18 projected player. You have to go, all the way up to Mike Trout and then, Randy Arozarena above him to get another $18 projected player. I'm going to pick him. Well, I hope you did a lot of work before and after to float that batting average.
Yeah, I think you look back at 2021, one thing that kind of stands out when he hit 266 that year, the home run to fly ball rate peaked, and he's hit the ball in the air more than ever. Like he's just like leaning into it in the years since. So I think that's where you look at that being in the rear view and you're like, oh yeah, 266 a couple of years ago, maybe it's not that bad. Probably is that bad. Probably is 220,
197 last year and 218 the year before. I expect like a 210, 220. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to build for it if you want to take advantage of that power from Kyle Schwarber. And surprising, too, the speed dried up real quickly after the stolen bases were unexpectedly there for him in 2022. Let's move on to Tier 4. A teammate of Kyle Schwarber's leads the way. Nick Castellanos, you got Spencer Steer, who we've kind of mentioned in passing on a few episodes, but haven't done the deep dive on yet. Lane Thomas, Seiya Suzuki, some younger guys also clustered in here with Jordan Walker, Esteury Ruiz, an old favorite with George Springer, and then Evan Carter and Jackson Chourio. So these guys go kind of all in the pick 100 to 130 range. One thing you'll notice if you look at the ADP charts for the outfield, there really aren't a lot of natural breaks. There's just outfielders everywhere. So you could put the lines wherever you want. I thought it was fun to kind of cut things off with Carter and Chourio just as guys that have either limited or no track record in the big leagues whatsoever, who sometimes do get jumped up to go up against some of the guys ahead of them.
Ahead of those guys, yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a FOMO kind of reach in how they are approached. But starting at the top of this group, Nick Castellanos, he just looks like a metronome sort of player at this point. Getting a little more pull happy, though. And I just wonder if he's going to give you more homers, but finally start to leak batting average, which was something that he did for a long time. He gave you great batting average with his power.
I'm out. And I hate to be a basic B with the chase rate thing, but he is 31. And what happens at 31 and 32 with a large chase rate is your ability to make pitch contact on those pitches outside the zone goes through the floor. And guess what happened last year for Nick Castellanos? The career low in contact on pitches outside the zone. And I don't expect that to recover. I would not regress that back to his league average. And so I do believe that for his career, he's going to have, going forward, he's going to have 28% type strikeout rates going forward. I think that will reduce his batting average. And I think you're looking at a 250, 25 homer hitting guy. And I think you can do better around him.
Yeah, so you're overpaying if that's what you get. I see the warning signs, and I'm with you. I think there's so many players I like going around this group. That's going to be part of the reason why I'm looking elsewhere anyway. Counting stats will be okay, maybe even a tick above average relative to what he does categorically, but it's going in the wrong direction. It's probably not coming back. Spencer Steer, you can use him in more places than the outfield, and he's going to play mostly in the outfield this year. People have been wondering really since the end of the season, can he do it again with the low barrel rate? Is there anything in the profile that's Isaac Paredes-like or anything like that? But I looked into this, and he didn't just lean into Great American Ballpark for power. It kind of reminds me of Jonathan India's skill set with better health, which is a pretty nice player, especially when you can use him at 3 different spots.
Yeah, here's another study I would like someone to do is there any way to nail down the value of the extra positional eligibilities? And my sort of back of the napkin math is I'm going to add $1 for every extra eligibility. And if you do that, then he's going in the right place among his peers. And I do think that it doesn't have to be draft and hold to value those eligibilities. If he's a first base, third base outfielder, and you have an injury in a head-to-head league, you now have, when you go to the waiver wire, you have the choice of where to replace him. You know, you can replace him at first, like, because you can move Steer around. You have an injury at any of those three positions, you can say, okay, well, I'll put Steer at first, and then I can pull an outfielder from the waiver wire. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I do think those extra eligibilities have value in terms of, sort of pulling for power. I think we look at it, and he has a more of a pulled fly ball approach than McLean. And so I think as I see it, I believe in his power a little bit more, or at least getting to his power more. And so I could see him actually advancing the barrel rate a little bit and showing a little bit more power this year. The projections don't agree with me, but I could see a more of a 270, and I believe a 270 batting average, because he convinced me when we talked this year that he has a really good two-strike approach, and I think that's why you've seen really good K rates up and down in his career. So with the two-strike approach, I'm giving him a 270 batting average, 25 homers and 15 steals. It's basically a repeat with maybe better runs and RBI as the Reds team gets better around him. I don't see why they wouldn't play him every day. Now that they can play him in the outfield, they have more of an infield roster crunch. This might be the last year you get those extra eligibilities, but he's fine for me. But he's sandwiching between two of my favorite players in this tier, players that I think shouldn't even be in this tier, and players that I think are great values in drafts, and that's Seiya Suzuki and George Springer. I think Steer kind of goes appropriately, but Springer showed that he still has power and speed. And if you want a 2020 guy, and I've needed those steals, his ADP right now is around 125. Who's he going up against in other positions?
The pick 125 range. Other positions would be on the pitching front, Tanner Bybee, Justin Verlander. For closers, you're at the Holmes, Kenley Jansen, Alzolay group.
It's pretty easy, Springer. I mean, this is why I've gotten a couple shares of him.
Spencer Torkelson and Sal Perez, if you're looking for power at first base or catcher. Yeah, so you're going to get a lot of Springer then.
I like Springer. I mean, I know that he's getting older, and, that at 34, you wouldn't want to really depend on a projected bounce back. But even last year, 104 WRC plus, you're not expecting him to bounce back from like a terrible year. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You're expecting him to be just a little bit luckier on balls in play, maybe show a little bit more power than he showed last year. And his max EV was fine last year. So you're basically just asking him to convert a few more hard hit balls into fly balls. Otherwise, even if he did what he did last year, 258, 21 homers, 20 steals, I would take that here easily. And a lot of times I need those steals. So I'm buying it. I don't see a drastic fall off at this age.
Yeah, and what is this this is another guy that's doing the Freddie Freeman thing. So it should be called like the Freeman Springer rule. Like speed can creep up in your early 30s. 20 for 25 as a base stealer. That's a career high for George Springer. I remember back when he was a prospect, it was expected he'd be a 5-category player.
That's true, yeah.
With a lot of swing and miss problems, so probably some categorical downside in batting average.
And look at him now, 18% strikeout rate.
He's done it for a long time that way. The quality of the contact, the barrel rates we saw from 19 through 21, those aren't there anymore, but it hasn't cratered to the point where you're worried about it. So I think as long as you trust that durability is not a problem. Had a lot of injuries in 21, had a minor injury in 22, missed some time in 19.
One of his worst career pull rates. Like I just feel like there's an easy place for him to focus.
So you're comfortable with Springer in this range. You did a good job swim moving around Lane Thomas. I think the shortcoming with Lane Thomas has been production against righties actually isn't great. It's a 91 WRC plus, but because he played so much and was getting to both power and speed, it was 19 homers and 17 steals in that split alone. But how long as they get better? I don't
trust players, real life players like this. Like, I wouldn't, if I was a major league GM, be calling the Nationals about Lane Thomas a lot.
Right. And they probably
because
don't
he's like
calls.
Barely above league average with the stick, 104 WRC plus for his career with the stick. And the defensive numbers don't agree. So I'd have to really believe he was a center fielder, which I don't even think the Nationals believe because they've played a lot of people in center field. So this is a kind of a marginal, this is a marginal package for me.
What if he becomes a left fielder? Takes some of the defensive pressure off, and they.
What about Joey Gallo?
Well, DH.
No, I mean, right now the depth chart at Fangraph says Lane Thomas, Joey Gallo, Victor Robles are the starters. I mean, it is a bad enough crew without a marginal, like slightly above average outfielder is going to play most of the time. But Dylan Cruz and James Wood are coming.
Yeah,
and if he slips at all, he could be the fourth outfielder there.
He seems a little out of place coming off of a career year where you're paying a tax for a player that probably starts to lose time. I think it's more 2025. I think it's more keeper in dynasty. He's more found money. You're not going to take Lane Thomas in a long-term league and flip him for great prospects.
Yeah.
No, you're better off just holding him and seeing what happens with another year where he's an everyday guy, because that's his way to exceed expectations again. It's just playing a ton. Seiya Suzuki, I feel like, is still kind of trendy as someone that maybe we haven't seen his best season in the big leagues yet because he missed some time. Yeah, you look at 583 plate appearances, a big step forward. He could max that out over 600, get to the 650 range potentially. There's average, there's decent power, solid run production. He was 6 for 13 as a base stealer, though. Like, what's up with the stolen bases?
That's a little weird. I didn't notice that. But good movement in his bat ball mix. I think the jump from a 31% pull rate to basically a 40% pull rate for Seiya Suzuki is going to be a positive. You see that show out in Suzuki's 40% hard hit rate going to 48%. So, and his max EV going from 111 to 115. So I see that's plus raw power, like 115. That's plus raw power. And I see him sort of figuring out how to get to it in the major leagues. And I know that he's 29. And so I'm talking about him like he's a 24-year-old rookie or something. But in terms of what he's played in the major leagues, it's still only 1,000 plate appearances. So I think he could pretty easily get to 25 homers this year, which he hasn't. I was going to give him 10 steals before you mentioned that he was 6 for 13. So maybe only 5 steals, but non-zero speed, good batting average, and I think a career high in homers for Seiya Suzuki this year.
He was 9 for 14 in his first season with the Cubs, so a little better, but a little surprising. He wasn't more efficient in 2023. I think even though I expect Lane Thomas to run more, I'd take Seiya Suzuki as the either or if you're looking at outfielders with those two at the top of your list. Jordan Walker, I think, is pretty interesting because there was the early season demotion for defensive reasons, and he was holding his own as a really young rookie coming off of an excellent spring last year. He's still going to only turn 22 in May, so still very, very young to break through. Quality of contact was very, very good for a rookie. You could see 20 homers and 10 steals pretty easily without improvement, but you could also see improvement. We talked about best speed, looking at the top 50% of a hitter's exit velocities, and he pops in that metric as a guy that does hit the ball hard often. I would look at that as something that could point to maybe the barrel rate getting better, especially if he starts lifting the ball a little bit more. I see a handful of ways for Jordan Walker to jump up out of this group and move up a tier or two over the course of this season.
I mean, it's plus raw power with a 114, 115 max EV, and some demonstrated plus power. I mean, if you just look at, something like a Fangraphs breakdown of his grades It's 70-80 raw power, 55-80 game power. That I think describes him very well. Is someone who's trying to get to that power, to that raw power. And the ground ball rate's a little bit high, but it's not over 50%. And he had more 44s and 45s. He had lower ground ball rates in the minors at most of his stops. And so I would expect the fly ball rate to inch up, the barrel rate to inch up, but could explode up. I mean, he could have like a 12, 15% barrel rate next year. He definitely has the skills to do that. But in terms of more sober projection, give him like a 10, 11% barrel rate. Give him, I think, better power than the projections are giving him. They're giving him a 175 ISO, 20 homers in 2/3 of a season. I think he has a little better than that.
Yeah, I'm with you on Jordan Walker.
That's a decently exciting player. He's that guy that I've ended up, because I think the would you rathers just probably ends up going against some pitchers where I feel like I need to take a pitcher. It is funny. I don't think I would take him over Springer. I haven't so far in drafts just because I've needed those steals, and I don't know how many Walker's going to give you. But if I had built a team that had Corbin Carroll early on, I think I'd take Walker over Springer just because you're getting a lot younger guy. The error bars in the right directions. And if I didn't need those extra 10 steals, then I think I'd prefer to take a young guy who hits the ball so dang hard.
Yeah. I think the Walker would you rathers end up being, Castellanos and Thomas within the group of outfielders, and even Suzuki to an extent. It's your middle infield speed play of Andres Jimenez in that range. This
is why I haven't ended up with it.
Bryson Stott goes around here too. Nolan Arenado only goes a little bit earlier than that. And I think the more I look at the two old Cardinals corner guys, the more I think I'm going to have them on way too many teams, which is going to make rooting for those guys all summer just so frustrating. I don't want to do it to myself. But
I just got Arenado. I did an old person double tap in the where did I get him? I got Springer and Arenado back to back in the 7th and 8th rounds. So that's pick like 115 and 117 or 118, something like that.
Now things are really fun at the end of this tier. We have to take a detour into the only in case of emergency player that is Esteury Ruiz. Has anything changed for you other than the price going up? I get it. He could steal 60 bases if he stays in the everyday lineup, but this is a guy that could be bad in all the other 4 categories. He could be below average for what you need in average runs, RBIs, and homers. Well, he will be below average in homers for sure, but even runs and RBIs, I don't see it. I don't think there's much left there to project off of. I mean, you see him a lot. Am I missing something? Is there anything he could do a little bit better with more experience? He is only going to be 25 when the season begins, so it seems unfair to completely write out the possibility of improvement, even though I want to do it so badly.
Jeff Zimmerman has a pretty cool piece called Mining the News on Fangraphs that just kind of goes and gives you little blurbs for Esteury Ruiz. He links to a Martin Gallegos piece on MLB.com about how Ruiz is working on getting to more power this swing. I think the biggest thing we can clean up his mechanics offensively, A's manager Mark Kotsay said. I think we can open up some more power for him and some bat speed. We're excited about that. It takes the player to engage and want to make those changes. I think he does want to make those changes. I do think that Esteury Ruiz thinks he can hit for power. If he hit 15, 18 homers, it would change the profile for me a lot. And it would push him probably into 110, 115 WRC plus. The defensive numbers are mixed on him, but maybe, this is a player who's played a lot of defensive positions on the way up in the minor leagues. Maybe just running out there every day at center field gets him to be, he has the tools for it. So I'm talking myself into Ruiz the same way I think that the A's front office did when they traded for him. But we've seen people like JP Crawford go to driveline and gain bat speed. And, I wish that I'd heard some key words in there, like maybe weighted bats or something. I don't really trust A's player development by themselves to produce this kind of an outcome. It's been a while since Matt Olson and Matt Chapman. I don't know. What do you think? That change your mind at all?
I see it in the minor league profile though too. Like he wasn't old for the level, and he hit 19 homers at Double-A between 21 and 22, and that was in like 133 games, and he stole 73 bases around that, and he did it with a reasonable K rate and has shown some patience. So like there are definitely ingredients of a player that's more than what he showed us in the big leagues. I guess I just don't know if he has enough flaws that pitchers can repeatedly expose the big league level, and that's what keeps him from ever really moving forward as a hitter.
Yeah. Plus, there's like such heavy confirmation bias for me, where it's like, this is what I thought he was going to be, and this is what he was.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think maybe it's a case where I'm looking at something really granular in the spring and seeing if he's hitting the ball harder than ever this spring. That might be a really small sample thing that matters to me, just because of the things we know he can do. We just got to see if there's a little more movement on that, the quality of contact. It was brutal last year. We're talking a 19.3% hard hit rate.
Oh, I mean, awful. Yeah. If he hits 5 homers again this year, you have to offset that with a hitter that hits like 40 homers basically.
Right.
And as much as there's been an offensive explosion in terms of 40 homer hitters, we're still talking about 6 of them last year. And even if you round up on like the 37 guys, you got 10. So that means that you have to have something that your other league mates don't have in order to pair. Or you get a bunch of 35s, but even 35 plus homers, there was 13 of them last year.
I think the other tricky part about this is if you looked at Ruiz and said, I'm playing the high stolen base angle, I'm playing gets a little better as a hitter, doesn't necessarily add a lot of power, but hits 260, gets on base more, and steals 50 plus bags. And then I'm going to take one, maybe probably two or three hitters early that don't run that much. And he's going to be my one guy that fixes it. Instead of taking a couple guys that get me 25 or 30 bags, I'm just going to take Ruiz. The problem with that strategy is someone else could take Ruiz. And then who else? Like, it's not an easy, there's another option lower that could fit that profile. Is there? I can't think of anybody that I see that
there's no
run that
one man stolen base solution, really.
One could emerge maybe, but I don't think there's an easy, obvious choice within the pool at the moment.
Take Jack Suwinski.
Yes, that fixes everything.
4 times.
Oh, man.
No, I mean, that joke is, the truth in that joke is that you would have to basically take like the 20 stolen base guy every time from there on out.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to take Jaron Duran, even if you thought he was flawed, and you'd have to take Stephen Kwan with no homers for his 20 stolen bases, and you'd have to take Jack Suwinski with his bad batting average, and then you'd have to take Leody. You'd have to load up on the 20s after that if you miss your spot. But I have texted you. He's probably one of the people I've texted you the most about. I think I've joked in both of these drafts, it's Esteury Ruiz time. That is a text that I've sent you multiple times.
I know, and I can't believe it because I felt like it was a no way going into last season, and he was going like 100 picks later than he's going right now. So now you're paying a little bit of a premium. I've
only ended up not taking him and doing more of the other route, where I end up with a bunch of, George Springer is the beginning of that approach of, I'm just going to get a bunch of 20 stolen base guys in the outfield. I do think there are a fair amount of 20 stolen base guys in the outfield.
Yeah, that's where when you work backwards and you start to think about Yordan Alvarez, if you're going to take Alvarez early, you want to make sure that you get speed from the other 4 outfielders, that you don't take another player like that. Like, you can have 2 hitters that don't steal bases outside of your catcher group. That's fine. But you don't necessarily want to make them both outfielders if you have a 5 outfielder league, because you may need those spots to make up that ground in the category. Just be mindful of where where your mashers are relative to each other within the lineup. The young guys here, Evan Carter, who we got to see debut and play throughout the postseason for the World Series champion Rangers, and Jackson Chourio, who we have not seen in the big leagues yet, but who signed a big contract extension this winter. They're just fun because you can dream on the potential. Given the current price and even possibly having to reach ahead of other guys in this group to get one of them, do you see yourself having Carter, Chourio, both, neither on your rosters this season for redraft purposes?
I haven't done it yet. What happens a lot of times is that somebody likes them a lot in the room, and you kind of want to keep, be reasoned, as I said, and sort of stick a little bit closer to the projections. And so you're hoping that maybe you get the choice, get his choice later where he's supposed to go. So by Steamer, he's supposed to go, let me see here, Chourio and Carter. Chourio has a $5 projection and Carter has an $8 projection. You would want to take them after guys like Friedel, Mullins, Happ, guys who are going to be on our next show. But by the projections, you'd want to take them after those guys. What happens is they even go before some of the guys we've been talking about. So Chourio in our league went in the 10th round, and he went ahead of actually he went here, but he went like by ADP, but like if you're looking at projections and you're like, well, Springer is projected for $17 and Chourio is projected for $5. That's just a big number. And so, I don't know. Carter goes ahead of Seiya Suzuki in our draft. And Chourio goes ahead of Mullins. Those are just decisions I didn't make. And it's possible I should have. Wyatt Langford is on this list. Wyatt Langford actually went ahead of Wyatt Langford actually went third. They're actually, really top end talents, and you're not spending the Bobby Witt price that we've talked about before, where you're having to buy somebody in the first 5 rounds that hasn't played much. This is rambling. I'm so sorry, but it's hard for me because my body doesn't want to do it. But I can't say it's a bad idea.
I think it's all it's kind of all about like historical context. When I look at young players who haven't played in the big leagues much or at all, and I try to set expectations. I mean, think about the spring where Julio Rodríguez just mashed his way onto the Mariners roster. Spring training mattered in terms of what it cost to get him. Even Jordan Walker last year. Jordan Walker's spring had a massive influence on his ADP. It always will have an influence for players like this because if people want to be right on these players, I want to be right about them. I want to have them if they're really good. But
you also want the plate appearances. It's not only how good they are true talent wise, it's are they going to play? Chourio at least has that contract and a team that's pretty desperate for his skill set. But Carter and Langford are on a team that's loaded that just won the World Series.
Yeah, but Carter was playing a prominent spot in that lineup once they brought him up when they won the World Series. So I think it was kind of clear that they needed him. We looked at that outfield all season. We're like, oh, left field, they should trade for somebody. They should do something to upgrade that spot. They had Mitch Garver as the second catcher DH. He's gone, so Langford effectively could take a large share of playing time there. I could see Carter, Langford, and Chourio all playing a ton. What tends to happen, this is a complete Captain Obvious statement, so I'm just giving you the warning for it now. For players that are like 21 and under, when they debut, if they stick around, they generally play well. Because if they don't play well, they get sent down.
Yeah.
So it's
but
like
that's the on-off switch that bothers me. Especially in a draft and hold, you're like, now I got 0.
yeah. I see going back to 2010, there are about a dozen seasons from players 21 and younger where they had a WRC plus under 100, but got over 400 plate appearances.
Those were on some bad teams.
Starling Castro in 2010, 99. It wasn't that bad. Francisco Alvarez last year, 97 WRC plus. Good enough, right?
Really important position.
Important position. Riley Green.
Chourio, center fielder.
Riley Green in 2022, 96 WRC plus. Bad team. Jason Hayward back in 2011, 96 WRC plus. It was 14 homers, 9 steals, 20% K rate. Fine. Played good defense in the outfield. Rougned Odor in 2014. Nomar Mazara in 2016. I think those were
the building teams.
When was the punch? When was the Bautista punch? What year was that?
Let me see. List of Rangers seasons.
I'll keep going. Rafael Devers in 2018 had a 90 WRC plus, 21 homers.
The Rangers in 2014 and 2016 were 2014 they were 5th, but 2016 they were 1st.
Yeah, so they let it ride. I think it depends on what else you have in your lineup too.
Yeah,
if you got other guys that are playing well that can keep it afloat, and you can just put someone like this in the bottom third of the order, and it doesn't matter that much.
I think this is a good argument that Evan Carter is going to play. He played well enough. He played on a team and they played that won the World Series, and they needed him. He plays good defense. I think he's going to play. Jackson Chourio, center fielder, on a team that does have other center fielders.
They have other guys that can play that position well defensively.
What if he has a bad offensive spring training?
Then they could probably give him a little time in Nashville and bring him up once he gets hot there.
Yeah,
I think.
But he could still have a good season. He could still have a 400. He could have Walker's season from last year, and people would be super happy to have, Jordan Walker's 450 plate appearances, 16 homers, 7 stolen bases, 342 OBP from center field from a 21-year-old.
Yep. Do you remember Ronald Acuña Jr.?
That's also interesting. Think about what he's going up against. That would be really good for the major league team. That would be a really good outcome for him going forward. But would that be a really good outcome for you in your fantasy team, picking him where you're picking him?
Yeah, I think the downside is you have to hold a roster spot for someone that's not giving you anything in the first month of the season.
You have to pick Acuña against other veterans that are good veterans. Like, these guys are getting picked ahead of Lars Nootbaar and Chas McCormick. These are 2020 type players. Like post-hype Riley Green is picked going after him. Cedric Mullins is a 30 stolen base threat. Like they're getting picked ahead of these guys, and they could give you what Jordan Walker gave you last year, which are people that drafted Jordan Walker last year in these main events and stuff happy with that?
At the inflated price, no. Maybe if you got him early, it didn't ruin you. Those were more draft and holds than mains, though, of course.
Then you were happy with it.
Yeah, because you ended up getting something out of him over the course of the year. The guys that do well, are guys that we really, really like. There's multiple Mike Trout seasons on here. Julio Rodríguez's rookie season's the 3rd best by WRC plus. There's 2 Juan Soto seasons on this list.
That almost won me a main, by the way, that Julio Rodríguez rookie season. So right. I'm not against it. But I took Julio Rodríguez as my utility player that year. So if you can find a way to take Chourio or Carter there, that's great. But they're going in the 9th. That's not your utility player.
Right. It's not as inflated as where rookie Bobby Witt Jr. was going, but it's not as cheap as pre-spring Julio Rodríguez went. So that's why it's a little more of a pressing question. It's like, well, okay, you can't just piece out completely, because right now the price is okay relative to the skill set. And when you look at the guys that have come up and done well, it's a bunch of players that you want because many of them became first rounders. Most of them became early rounders because they had success at such a young age.
But you have to remember, if it's not a dynasty league, they could still have a pretty good season, not be that valuable to you, and be great in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the tug for me. That's why I don't usually end up with guys like that. The closest I got in this draft right now is I took Zach Geloff in the 10th. But I don't think that's quite the same, because at the very least, Zach Geloff's going to play every day. I don't think they're sending him down.
seems pretty unlikely. I think the thing I like about both of these players, you can see categorical boost really across the board from both. If there's too much swing and miss for Chourio initially, which is possible, 18% carry at AA as a 19-year-old is so good. If that jumps up, he could steal a lot of bases. He was 43 for 52 at AA last year. So he might be good defense, speed, not a lot of average at first, the occasional homer, and then it all starts to click second half of the season, final month of the season, 2025. I don't know, man. I could talk myself into drafting one of these guys, and it might even be. So here's my thought. Instead of Ruiz, like we know Jackson Chourio has power. Yes, there's playing time risk, but Ruiz has playing time risk too. Chourio has speed. Ruiz has speed. But why wouldn't I just take Jackson Chourio if I need a player like that? Because there's a world in which Ruiz plays less than Chourio this year, even if healthy. He could just be bad. That could happen to him too. So if you're willing to take Ruiz, how would you not be willing to take?
Which is why I don't end up with Ruiz. I think that these are like if you're talking about like sort of the distribution of outcomes, the floor is so low. Like I would rather my floor for my player is he plays, most of the time and is oatmeal. Yeah. My favorite players are oatmeal floor, but also some upside. These guys are like dirt floor, and like the distribution of outcomes is so wide that it just makes me nervous. Sometimes I think you got to take it. That's why I took Geloff there. It's a little bit out of flavor for me. But I do think that me as a player, I need to sometimes be like, hey, I got to have some YOLO picks in here. Yuri Perez and Zach Geloff are my YOLO picks. But as you can tell, there's carefully picked YOLO picks in that I think they'll still play. Yuri Perez, if he's healthy, is going to start for the Marlins.
Oh, he's fine. It's just some innings management still there, but they pushed him harder than I thought they would last year, which I think bodes well for 2024.
And Chourio seems set up with the deal and the needs on that Brewers team to just be like, hey, here are the keys from day one.
I think I got to do it. I know the projections are pretty solid, 252 to 303 OBP. Fine, I can live with that. The average might not hurt me. 16 homers, 17 steals with 466 plate appearances.
The steal number there has an upward button on it, I think.
For sure. And I look at that, I'm like, okay, if the projections say 94 WRC plus, that's just good enough to keep playing, which means the plate appearance number is probably low, which means everything else is low. I'm in. I've talked myself into it. We've worked through the problem. But the problem really is ADP is going to go up. So it's like now and maybe in February, and probably not going to happen for me in March.
So then it's going to be Chourio against, Seiya and Springer, which
it's going to roll.
It's going to be Chourio against Bryan Reynolds and Christian Yelich.
It's going to and that becomes harder for me because then it's like, okay, now we're passing on $20 guys.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of a drop here where I think you can justify it for the time being, and you're not taking excessive risk, even though you are taking risk. It reminds me more of Acuña's rookie year and where he was being drafted relative to some of the other prospect ADPs we've seen in the years since, which seem like they just keep going up. That's why I'm a little surprised to see Jackson Chourio sitting in this bucket for the time being. I'll take my chances.
Works for now. I got one more DC in my 3-pack. I'll see if I can sneak a Chourio or Carter. I think that they're actually they're not necessarily similar in approaches and skill sets and everything, but I think that they represent a little bit of a mini tier that you can kind of circle, try to get one of those later just for the upside. We kind of didn't talk about Carter as a player. One thing I love about him is his plate appearances. I mean, his plate discipline. And I feel like, if he could just be a little bit more aggressive, he could turn some of those called strikes into balls in play. I think that's where you got a 32% K rate that looks out of whack with what he did in the minors, and on top of a 10% swinging strike rate for Evan Carter. So like, I expect his strikeout rate to go down. And in fact, even in the postseason, you start to go down. So with that going down, he has a little bit more polished of an approach than Jackson Chourio, so maybe a higher floor. And I think he's still got the playing time. So both these guys seem like I've talked myself into it, are good values where they are, even if the projections say they're not.
Right. Yeah. And I think you get a better floor, relatively speaking, out of Carter because of the team around him and that approach. I think there's that. But I also think Chourio probably has the higher ceiling of the two, even though they both have ridiculously good ceilings.
Yeah.
Look at us talking ourselves into risky decisions.
Let's get risky.
Bad.
I had to explain to my kid what YOLO was because I said I was doing a YOLO pick in my draft.
Your kid is so young that YOLO doesn't even register. That's incredible.
Well, sometimes you run in different circles because I actually think my younger son would know what YOLO is. So anyway,
you describe the differences between them, and I understand. Yeah.
But he does want to me to start a fantasy league for him, so I'm going to start a fantasy league for my 11-year-old and his baseball friends. And I wonder what the settings should be. I think they should be maybe head to head, so they can talk trash to each other a little bit. I don't know if they are all going to have the attention span to hold on to Roto all year.
26-week Roto season for little league kids.
11-year-old. Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, I think that half of them will stop sending their lineups. At least with the trash talking, you might be like, "Hey, set your lineup, kid."
Yeah, that might keep things moving.
Yeah.
As I mentioned up top, if you would like to get a subscription to The Athletic, $2 a month gets you in the door for the first year. TheAthletic.com/rates and barrels. Lots of great content rolling out already and a ton more to come as baseball season is just around the corner. I mentioned at the top also, 2 more Outfield episodes to go. We have a lot of ground to cover, so those are coming out on Thursday and Friday. Eventually, we will get back to questions. You can send those our way. ratesandbarrels@gmail.com is the best way to email those our way. You can find Eno on Twitter at Eno Saris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening.